Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will call to order the Missoula City Council meeting of January 10th, 2022. I'll note for the record that all council members save Ms. West are present. Pardon me. We have minutes of the meeting of January 3rd, and without objection, they will be approved. I will note for the record that Ms. West is now in attendance. Seeing no changes to the minutes, we'll move on to our schedule of committee meetings. Ms. Rabine.
Thank you, Marianne. So hang on just a second. I'm going to share my screen. I'll show folks how to get to our committee schedule here. All right. I think everybody can see that. So in order to find our committee meetings and the respective agendas and how to join them, folks, all you need to do is Google the city of Missoula or use your favorite web browser. You don't have to use Google. But we should be right there at the top of your search results. And right here below a beautiful picture of our lovely city is a meetings button. Now, if you click that, you're going to get to our public meeting portal where we have all of the agendas for our public meetings. And on Wednesday is when we set up our committee meetings. Tonight, we are actually going to set committee meetings for the upcoming 2 weeks. And because there is no meeting next week, it is a holiday on Monday. We're celebrating Martin Luther King Day. So we'll be setting up committee meetings for the coming 2 weeks. In order to see the agenda for one of these meetings, you can just click on the meeting that you are interested in attending. And right here next to the word agenda is an HTML link or a PDF link. Those are just basic formatting kinds of things. But if you click on either one of them, you will open up the agenda for that respective meeting. And right here at the top, you can see it says attend by computer. So if you're joining by computer, you just click this join the meeting button, and that will take you to the Zoom webinar for this particular meeting. Likewise, there are phone numbers that you can dial in for each meeting, and you'll see a webinar ID that you'll need to enter. I don't usually have to enter the password code, but it is here in case you need it. And so that way you can join, attend, and participate in our meetings. Now, if you just want to watch and you don't want to do all those things, we do have links here to our meetings page, our meetings portal, where you can watch meetings live and on demand as soon as we start the meeting. There'll be a video link that you can click on and look at, just watch the meeting. We also stream these meetings live on YouTube, on the city's YouTube channel. And for years and years and years, our partners over at Missoula Community Access Television have been live streaming city council and committee meetings on Spectrum Cable Channel 190. Now, also at the top of our meeting page, I'm going to just click back to this thing. We have a master schedule of all of our committee meetings. That's right here at the top. And so I want to go through what our committee meetings look like for these coming 2 weeks. Again, no city council meeting next week because of the Martin Luther King holiday. So we are setting committee meetings for the coming 2 weeks. And so on Wednesday, the 12th of January, Public Works Committee will meet from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. They'll be taking up a bid regarding a remodel project in municipal court. We're setting up a third courtroom. Public Works will be considering a professional services agreement with WGM for some stormwater improvements up in the South Hills, as well as an amendment to an agreement with WGM that the city already has for the Mullen Road reconstruction project. Land Use and Planning Committee will follow on the 12th of January from 10:15 until 11 a.m. and they will be taking up a conditional use request for veterinary animal services at 1914 South Reserve Street and 2432 North Avenue. City Council does have a public hearing schedule on that. And so I believe this project is, or no, they don't have a public hearing. They will be talking about it, making a recommendation on that, because it's conditional use. Jordan, did I get that wrong? Is it pre-public hearing? Now I'm questioning.
No, it's the public hearing tonight, and then the mid-public hearing.
Okay, so that's right. We are having a public hearing tonight, and Land Use and Planning Committee will be taking this matter up in order to discuss it and make a recommendation for the full council's consideration on the 24th. Thanks for setting me straight there. On the 19th, Wednesday, the 19th, Public Works Committee will meet again. They'll meet from 9 o'clock to 9:20. They're going to be taking up a resolution to order right-of-way improvements on Eaton Street and Phase 1. And that project goes between South 7th Street West to South 13th Street West. And that is our committee schedule for the next 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any changes to that committee schedule this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the general public comment portion of our agenda. This is your opportunity to comment on items not elsewhere on the agenda this evening. Any general public comment? Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Mayor Engen, City Council members and staff. Good evening, and thanks for this opportunity to provide public comment. My name is Dave Harmon, and I'd like to make just 3 brief comments. First, I'd like to welcome the 4 new City Council members. Certainly take my hat off to anyone willing to step up and serve the public in this capacity. I know what a commitment this entails. Secondly, I want to again thank council members that adopted the 100% clean electricity resolution. Also, I'd like to remind all council members that while the goal to reach 100% clean electricity by 2030 seems like a long ways in the future, the interim goal of 80% clean electricity is just 3 years away. That's 2025. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. Finally, I'd like to encourage all council members and the mayor, if you haven't already done so, please watch that Netflix movie, Don't Look Up. If you haven't seen it, you know, on the surface, it's a movie about a huge comet or meteor that's headed for Earth and will destroy life on Earth if not stopped. But you'll quickly notice that the movie is an allegory for climate change. It's supposed to be funny, but I found it deathly serious and extremely frightening because it exposes how unbelievably badly we've dealt with this impending crisis. So if you get a chance, hope you'll watch it and maybe connect the dots between this movie and what you can do with a 100% clean electricity resolution. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Seeing no additional general public comment this evening, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Items there, pardon me, were approved unanimously, generally speaking, in committee meetings. We save a little time on Mondays by considering these items as a package. My dog is barking, which is why it works better for me to preside over these meetings at my office. Apologize for that. Ms. Rabine will read the list of consent agenda items aloud, so folks viewing the meeting will know what we're considering, and we'll take comment on these items before we vote. Ms. Rabine.
Mayor Engen, I'm so glad that you clarified that it isn't me barking. Tonight's consent agenda has 7 items, and The first one is to approve accounts payable, which are the city's bills. We're paying vendors who've done work for the city in the amount of $781,286.96 for checks that are dated tomorrow, January 11th, 2022. Number 2 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement not to exceed $400,000 over 4 years with WGM Group to provide phase 1 environmental site assessments, phase 2 environmental site assessments, site cleanup and planning, and other services related to the environmental assessment. You know, I just realized I could share my screen and y'all could read along with me and correct my homework if I get it wrong. Let's do that. All right, here we go. Item number 3 is to confirm council members to be appointed to corresponding board and commission liaison positions as listed below. We're appointing Dan Carlino to the Missoula Civic Television Advisory Committee. City Council is appointing Sandra Rosica to the Local Emergency Planning Committee, Gwen Jones to the Community Forum, Amber Sherrill to the City County Health Board, and Mirta Becerra to the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee. Number 4 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with Herrera Environmental Consultants for levy recertification support in an amount not to exceed $61,346. Number 5 is to confirm police officers Joel Diaz, Mackenzie Ranger, and Kayla Weiser. I asked the police department how to pronounce that, so I'm kind of proud of myself because I would not have gotten that correct. Number 6 is to authorize the Missoula Fire Department to purchase 1 Type 3 fire engine from Fuse Fire Equipment and 1 staff vehicle. It's a 1/4-ton pickup truck being purchased through the group purchasing organization named Sourcewell. In the amount of $400,000 for the fire engine and $40,000 for the pickup truck. Number 7 is to confirm the mayor's appointment of Dory, oh dear, I'm going to mess this one up though. I think it's Gilels, maybe. Yes? Galels. Okay, to the planning board for a term that begins January 1st, 2022 and expires on December 31st of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any council members care to comment on any items on the consent agenda this evening? All right, seeing none, anyone in the audience care to comment? And seeing none there, we'll have a roll call vote.
Okay, great. On the consent agenda, Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Carlino.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Nugent.
Yes.
Savage.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasica.
Yes.
And West.
Yes.
That's great. That's 12 ayes and nobody's absent.
And the consent agenda is approved. We have no comments from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, nor the community forum this evening, nor do we have any special presentations. We do have 2 public hearings and state law and our own council rules set guidelines for inviting comment on a variety of issues in a formal way. Pardon me, following a staff report on each, the council and I will invite comment. Council will not take final action on these items until its next regular meeting, which is 2 weeks from today. So the public hearings will remain open until council takes these items up for final consideration. Our first public hearing this evening is on the master fee schedule for our Parks and Recreation programs. And our staff report this evening comes, as always, from Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you. This is year 16, you guys.
For me too, Shirley. 17, sorry.
Oh my gosh. So thanks so much. I'm gonna share my screen here. And can you see that?
We can.
I am so excited every time that works. So this document is an annual process that we get, a public process that we go through to set the facility reservation contracts and permits and programs fees for the year. We're required by Montana code to hold a public hearing before increasing any fees. And our annual process includes informing and reviewing with the user groups. We get review and approval from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, who also looks at our policies for implementing fees. So they approve those this year. The review by County Parks, Trails, and Open Space Board as it pertains to Fort Missoula Regional Park. That's a partnership that we have with the county to operate that as one park. The Park and Conservation Committee does a review, and then this public hearing. So why do we charge fees? Most fees are connected to additional services that are provided beyond normal maintenance levels. So when we look at fee analysis, we do a lot of analysis to make sure that we're not overcharging anybody for services. We look at wages, staff wages, supplies, what they're actually requesting, what services we're providing, and some utilities directly associated with those facilities. We essentially have 4 funding mechanisms: the general fund, the park district, our fees, and donations, sponsorship, grants, and our bake sales. So our fee strategy in general is to work towards a break-even point. And generally, we look at cost recovery expenses that are directly related to the extra services that we're providing. So this is a simplified slide representing the fort revenues, and there's essentially 3 budgets represented here. And you can see from this oversimplification that over 2/3 of our revenue out at the fort are tax-based supported. So the Park District 1 and then the county contribution are all tax support. The rest are generated from fees for the extra services that we provide. So some of the typical services that we provide, I picked out some examples. So someone rents a softball field and they expect to have the field prepped. So that means that the outfield foul lines are painted, the infield is drug, chalk lines are on the bases and the batter's box, and the lights are available when it gets dark. For our shelters, it really helps with planning. We get a lot of reservations for our shelters every year, from reunions, celebrations of life, weddings, gosh, you name it, we've seen it. And people that rent shelters for their events expect that when they show up, it's reserved for them for the day. The shelter's clean, the garbage is reasonably serviced, and the restrooms are clean and accessible. The last example is a special use permit. And usually expectations is there's no user conflict with that facility for the day. reserve facilities are clean and the area is prepped for the event per the customer's request. So why do we charge fees? Fees generally increase our ability to serve more residents by expanding capacity. It allows increased value or quality of services that we provide. It reduces conflict and challenges having facilities on a site reservation system. And through statistically valid surveys, we've learned that the majority of Missoula taxpayers express a great deal of satisfaction and support for parks, facilities, trails, recreation programs, and the opportunities that we provide. These same taxpayers indicate that while they support the overall mission and opportunities that we provide, they'd like to see those who are directly benefiting from the use of facilities and services pay the cost for those through user fees. So why do we increase fees over time? This year, obviously, inflation has grabbed us, or the cost of doing business. We're looking at a lot of supply shortages, along with costs increasing across the board from 10 to 25+%. That includes our operating supplies and office supplies, gasoline, repair supplies. Our purchase services have and will increase, including natural gas, electricity, water, wastewater, our telephone, licensing dues, software contracts, and professional maintenance services. And lastly, our staffing costs. We've got to be able to pay a competitive wage so we can recruit and retain qualified employees who in turn provide residents these multitude of services. So fees are fees paid determines basically who can play, participate, or reserve a facility. And small incremental increases are generally more acceptable to users and residents. The proposed fee increases for pools won't fully cover the costs related to the inflation we've been seeing, but they'll help. We really should have asked more, but it's the law of diminishing returns there. Missoula residents, please remember that Missoula residents are all eligible for a 20% discount on programs and access to the Currents and Splash Aquatics parks. Generally, fees are a regressive system. Increasing fees generally affects those who can little afford to pay the higher prices. So in order to retain a higher level of access for those people, we continually work to maintain a robust scholarship program. And the families and individuals basically self-identify their needs. So this program needs additional support based on what we've seen in the last 2 years. In section 1, the softball diamonds, generally most of the fees are going to go up 10%. The fields 10%, prep fees 10%, the lights at McCormick 20%, and the Fort lights 10%. The hourly rate increase for to rent a softball field at McCormick or the Fort will increase to $20.75 an hour. And for all-day tournaments, all-day field reservation is based on a 10-hour day. At Playfair, the baseball and softball fields will increase 10%. The multi-use fields at Playfair Park will also increase 10%. So a little prep before we get to the fort fees. This last, in 2021, in February, we put together a turf working group. And the group was established to gather facts, develop goals and priorities to make recommendations to us regarding the management of the fort multi-use rectangular fields. That would be funny if they were triangles. The goal of this group was to establish clear and open lines of communication between the turf users and us, and resulting in recommendations related to management of the turf fields in order to meet their desired outcomes. One of the relevant recommendations was due to a professional turf audit we had done. And due to the hourly use of each field out there at the fort, it was recommended that our current maintenance level sitting at a 3.17 on a scale from 1 to 5 needed to increase to a 4.25. So that was a pretty big jump. And it was recommended that we do that through additional maintenance and with aeration and using a liquid fertilizer more often than what we normally do with granular fertilizer. So park operations this past year did a test run of the system. They borrowed equipment from the cemetery. They have a liquid fertilizer spreader, and deferred maintenance and supplies from other areas at the fort, and generally saw really positive results, but just not sustainable with borrowed equipment and without staff to dedicate to that project job. So therefore, we put pencil to paper and ended up coming up with a formula to help support hiring an additional person at the fort that would be dedicated to this task of maintenance on these rectangle fields. So the two, the full-size soccer field and the 7v7 fields will increase in price by 52%, from 21 an hour to 32 an hour, and then from 15.75 to 24. So that's a pretty significant jump. And that was a recommendation from the turf working group, who was represented by soccer, lacrosse, rugby, and ultimate frisbee, basically our 4 big user groups. The Bella Vista turf increased 21%. And essentially what we found that the rubber that we use is a virgin polymer. And we're finding that it breaks down easier than what normal rubber that's ground up from tires. So we're having to replace the infill every couple of years, which is a significant cost. Our infield's healthier, but it doesn't hold up as well as the stuff that's laden with chemicals. But it's better to run on. So, so with these increases, we added some policy that I want to share with you. I don't usually bring policy here, but I think that this is really important. I know when I heard 52% increase, I was freaking out with my programs. So I knew what micro strikers in the YMCA were going to think. So we developed the ability to provide a discount for youth developmental programs or programs that include adults that meet all these criteria, but they're designed specifically for inclusion of individuals that are otherwise have no access. So essentially, it's pretty straightforward. They just need to be in good standing. They follow the city's non-discrimination policy. It's open to all youth. The youth that do register get put on a team. Youth have an opportunity to play every game. Coaches receive some kind of training that fosters positive youth development. Scholarships or financial aid program is provided and easily accessed. And then annual reporting. The multi-use fields in the neighborhoods will increase 10%, along with the football fields. The volleyball, outdoor volleyball courts increased 10%. The Moon Randolph Homestead consolidated special events in their wedding ceremony. So actually a reduction there to match their special events fee. All of our park shelters will increase 10% throughout the system. At Fort Missoula, we'll increase the shelters 10% as well. In addition, we need to start replacing some of the amenities that we rent. So the tables and chairs will increase from $6 to $10, and the chairs from $1 to $2. And we're adding a mobile HQ trailer to help with tournaments. The Ponderosa meeting room out at the fort, we actually ended up deleting this from the master fee schedule. It's getting harder and harder because we no longer have it available for rent just because of the office and storage space challenges that we have out there. The Sports and Wellness Center at City Life Gym, we terminated the annual agreement as of July 1st this past year, but we continue to have a good working relationship and partnering with Youth for Christ and the City Life. So in section 2, all the permits pretty much stayed the same price. Amplified sound, I added the reference to the ordinance that passed earlier this fall. Marshall Mountain is coming online here with us with the agreement that we have with the city, county, Five Valleys Land Trust, MBT, and Izzy Dog. So we patterned the fees generally after the conservation lands fees into small, medium, large, extraordinary fee structure with a number of participants. And then we also added a surcharge for closing trails or closing the entire area. We have a permit for commercial outfitters, an educational permit, and that patterns after the conservation lands management permits, and a youth sports team permit that essentially runs for seasons July 1 through December or January through June 31st. There have been some comments about closing the area and charging a surcharge. But historically, the past events happening up at Marshall Mountain, generally related to larger national level collegiate and professional mountain bike racing. And we expect for those events to be back within the next couple of years. So for safety standards, and to meet the UCI standards we really need to control access to race courses. You can't, just for safety, you can't allow the public on a race course while someone's careening down it. With the interim permit, we had to decide whether we were going to prohibit these type of large events, which was not the property owner's wishes, current property owner's wishes, or to allow them and go with temporary closures. So in general, we anticipate in the next 2 years that we would have closures for 2 to 6 days total throughout the year. And then we hope that our management experience this year and in 2023 will inform us and help us develop the official permit system for Marshall Mountain, assuming that the city and the partners are actually able to purchase the property. Aquatics fees, this is a long presentation. I'm sorry, you guys. The aquatics fees will all increase 50 cents. It's a 6.5% increase. And you can see that with the red on this side is the city card discount. So even with the increase, the fee is still less than the current regular rate. So we try really hard to provide those discounts for the city residents that help fund us. The aquatics facility is basically a flip from the fort. It's an enterprise fund, so you can see that fees for services make the majority of our revenue. And we're hoping with the 50 cents increase that will close this gap, this $71,000 gap, $50,000 to $60,000. So that's our hopeful target. Like I said, we needed to probably raise the rates to $1, but chose to just stay with 50 cents. We've got 9 different options to buy down an aquatics pass. And remember that on top of all these options, there's a 20% discount. So we try to make it as affordable as possible, and we do have the scholarship program. The Teams and Adventure Ropes course will increase 10% due to wages, supplies, and inspection fee increases. The urban forestry. So these new programs here won't affect the traditional tree replacement program or any tree planting that will be done through the reforestation program. So the number 4, Missoula's urban reforestation program, is to assist adjacent property owners in planting new trees in the boulevards. $750 per tree, and this fee will be is the purchase for the tree, the planting in front of the resident's house. This fee also helps for each tree purchased, approximately $200 will be deposited in a scholarship fund to be used to increase reforestation rates in underserved areas. We also have a memorial tree dedication program now. The fee will be $1,500 for a traditional tree with a plaque, and the fee will support planning and a long-term care, and I believe it's a 5-year long-term care. In developed parks, they added the memorial bench program, And you can pay to refurbish a existing bench, adding an ADA pad where it's accessible. Or you can buy a new bench, and they have options for a backless series or a bench with a back. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey. That was thorough, and I appreciate it. With that, Shirley, if you wouldn't mind removing your screen share, I will open the public hearing. And anyone care to comment this evening? Mr. Loomis.
Hi, thank you. Let me unshare my screen with myself. Excuse me. Thank you so much. Happy New Year. Congratulations to those newly elected. My name is Matt Loomis. I live in Missoula, and I'm going to start by saying I'm not just a supporter of Parks and Rec, of trails, conservation, land stewardship. I'm also a donor. I'm a contractor, or have been a contractor for parks, a partner, a renter, and I even work part-time for them. I'm an ally, but I'm speaking tonight asking you to formally oppose this, come up with something better. Even with what I'll be saying here, and I'll try to go quick. Parks and Rec Director Donna Gockler actually agreed with this statement during a December Parks Board meeting. Be assured I'm not just complaining about costs going up. It stinks, everyone can agree with that, but I do take issue that these are annual increases for what are mostly good reasons, but reasons that those who approve these should be aware of, and you should take this into consideration. Increases in parks expenses have gone up, and I'm not questioning that, but I question that parks is just being tasked with doing too much with too little. As the city grows, you install new parks, trails, open space, you buy big mountains, pedestrian facilities, bridges over South Reserve, landscaping, sports fields. The number of users grows, but the budget does not grow with that. For decades, this has added undue burden on Parks and Rec. Maintenance and operations fall behind. In some cases, these are planned, like the Fort Missoula Regional Park, but the fallacy there is that nothing was budgeted for maintenance and ongoing ops. So this comes out of their working budget. Most responsibilities then are just kind of dropped in Parks and Rec's lap, and they have to figure it out. They're tasked with maintaining so many different things, but their budget doesn't keep up. I can't stress that enough. The city's done a great job, I think, of trying to give employees better wages and benefits, partially at the direction of City Hall. But the departmental budgets, like Parks and Rec, do not increase to cover those costs. So Parks and Rec has to pay more. That's great, but they're not given the money to do that. So now they have to find money, and this isn't right. City Council should be allocating funds for these additional costs, especially ones they say they need to pay for, just as they do for other departments. Parks and Rec has minimal ways to increase revenues. The main avenue, though, is through increasing facility rental rates. That's basically what Shirley was just saying. But that also double taxes users. If I want to use a public trail, which requires maintenance, requires planning, building, property acquisition, I don't have to pay to use it. I'm already paying with my taxes and with the park district. But if I want to rent a field, I want to use an open space, I have to pay now. The 2022 proposal has an average suggested increase of 10%. That's astronomical. Additionally, there is and was not feedback from user groups prior to forming these annual rate increases. I am a user group, I'm part of one. We were informed that there'd be pending fee increases. This is an annual thing, we are told, but there was no opportunity for discussion. Turf users, I'm also told, were not completely on board with this. So please don't take everything as gospel. Frankly, not all user groups get what they're paying for either. So increasing fees make 0 sense. The services provided don't justify these increases or the existing pricing structure. And I understand that's a different argument. What maybe concerns me the most, though, is that the increase in fees for individuals and groups to use public parks leads to a smaller population able to use them. Law of diminishing return, just like Shirley mentioned. Recreation is literally in the department's name, but much of the general public is priced out of being able to do that. It's great that they're adding this new discount policy, but just stop. Don't make these ridiculous increases, and then you can have less policies to enact. While I hear and respect what Shirley said about increasing fees on user groups who use facilities, I get that. Parks and Rec should not be a revenue driver and it's not set up to be one. Proper budgeting and support could allow Parks and Rec to handle basic expenses or increased expenses on their own, at least without constantly increasing fees. You should be aware that on the Parks website, it actually states, quote, "Equity is about ensuring everyone receives the appropriate investment for where they are. The same principle is true of park use and access. Parks and Recreation works to ensure all residents have equitable access to programs and services regardless of ethnic origin, socioeconomic level, etc." This goes against their mission statement. As far as the law of diminishing returns, I agree. There were 3 adult softball organizations, for example, as well as adult football. There is no more adult football because fees went too high. 1 adult softball organization folded because of fees. Another could go under because of fees. Another, the main program has probably seen a 25 to 33% decrease in teams since the new fort was built, which means the fees skyrocketed. That's great that we have a youth scholarship program, but we shouldn't have to rely on that to allow kids to participate. That's ridiculous. And there is no such program for adults. Lastly, while there is a concurrent plan to add an expensive addition to the batting cage area at the fort, it's not a good look right now that we're going to be going to the public for money to add to the fort complex, and we're also raising rental rates 10%. It's bad optics. Finally, thank you for your time, but I asked City Council to properly fund Parks and Rec, and it's not too late, instead of continuing to pass exorbitant fees onto user groups. Ask them how much money they need and then give it to them. Do not support this proposal and the associated fee increases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Loomis. Seeing no additional public comment, this public hearing will remain open for the next 2 weeks. Are there questions or comments from council members? Ms. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shirley, I just wanted to ask a couple questions. I think where I'm kind of having some struggles and understanding is with the Marshall Mountain all-day rental rate of $750 a day. I see that as kind of an unequitable proposal. So, you know, not anyone can afford that. It doesn't seem like there's probably a scholarship program for folks to do that. And I'm kind of curious how you folks came up with your anticipated rate of about 4 days a year that this might get shut down. I have a friend who runs a business that relies on access to Marshall Mountain, and it would affect his business, let alone all of the other folks who love to go to Marshall Mountain. And so I'm just curious how you folks came up with 4 days a year anticipated shutdown. And I do have another question if that's all right as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So generally we looked at past history and the events that have taken place annually up there. We did a meeting with about 20 users that helped guide our process. And I brought Jeff along to to give any details that I am unaware of.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. And hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Kicklehorn. I'm the Conservation Lands Manager for City of Missoula Parks and Recreation Department. A couple of things. I know that there were questions brought up during the Parks and Conservation Committee meeting. You know, as a reminder, this is an interim permit. So right now the city does not own the property. And so we're looking at a way to facilitate sort of historic use of the property in the sense that there have been large-scale permanent events in the past, given the constraints of the current construction of the site and trail system. And so given that, as Shirley has said, prior large-scale recreation events have closed the entire site. Remember that it was private property. We had the ability to do that. So we are working within the constraints of the site construction at this time. That being said, you know, this is again a 2-year interim permit. The idea with the sort of public visioning for the site that's happening right now is that we have the ability to potentially plan a system or a site that allows users to circumnavigate the permittable area. So in the future, if there is a large scale recreation event, again, let's say a collegiate mountain bike race, that would only affect sort of a core of the property, and that users could then access portions of the site outside of that. Again, in an attempt to provide more equitable access at that time. Given the constraints of the system, and I've been out there many days since we signed the lease agreement, that it is really challenging. Many of the trails cross roads. And so especially for a, again, collegiate or professional level event, you're going to have significant danger both to non-permitted recreational users as well as permitted recreational users due to the speeds that a race may occur at. And so that's where the worry is about, public safety as well as user safety.
Jeff or Shirley, I'm going to take a leap here, and do we know what previous owner charged for access to the private property?
We don't have hard numbers on that. And in fact, in many cases, I think that Bruce Doring didn't charge users, for smaller scale events. For larger scale events, they did. I don't have a fee schedule that they use. And to some extent, I think it varied based on who was applying and what the size or type of event was.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan, do you have a second question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My other question is about who can, I think I already know the answer, but it sounds like anyone with $750 can shut Marshall Mountain down for a day. Is that correct? Or are there certain conditions or requirements, like it has to be a public event, or I'm not sure what they might be, but if I had $750, could I just shut it down for the day?
So there's two things. One, when somebody applies, they're just like any other permit application, whether or not it's a conservation lands permit or a use of a developed park, that still has to be vetted by staff. And so if someone was to submit a proposal, an application and say, I have, a 50-person event and I want to shut things down, we have the ability to say, no, that's not reasonable, right? Generally, we're only looking at, sort of exclusive use of the property for those very large or extraordinary sized events. So the 600 plus person, and that's participants, not including spectators. And the way that we've structured the application period, there's an open application period that runs, it's intended to run till January 31st. It's being set back this year because of this process. We then vet all applications for the season at the same time to make sure that an event is not, it's not being closed day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, right? That any impacts to regular public use of the site are minimized and then also spread out throughout the season.
Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Carlino?
Yeah, my question was going to be, what % of the new increases to the Parks and Recs budget is coming from fee increases?
So Mr. Carlino, we haven't established what the budget is for next year. So,
I guess so. There was 4 ways that we can fund Parks and Rec, and it looked like, and I was curious if with all these new things that Parks and Rec needs, is it all trying to be funded through these fee increases, or is there something else?
No, so traditionally, like every city department, there is almost always more need and more want than there is money. And so we're, Mr. Loomis's comments really go to, we have a choice of how we make this as equitable as possible to continue to provide the services that we provide. And so in the case of user groups, some of which are nonprofit, yet still charge their participants to engage in their activities. We're trying to recapture at least some of those costs so that we're not reaching into the Parks District. and increasing taxes broadly to pay for those services. You look at any other city department that provides services. We have costs for service on almost everything that is a direct service to a user or an end user. So a rezoning, for example, there's a significant fee that comes with that. There are fees that come with when we fingerprint someone, for example, because they need fingerprints done for an application of some kind. We're doing our best to balance that general taxation, property taxes, and fee revenue, and looking for the magic equity there. For me, having experienced these increases over time, what we see is, one, we're not turning anyone away by virtue of our scholarship program. Two, we're pretty flexible, and we actually do listen to user groups. And I'm not sure that I would necessarily agree with Mr. Loomis's comments with regard to how we do that. So this really is about finding that balance, particularly in specialized facilities like those at Fort Missoula Regional Park, which were designed for in some cases very high-end use. We don't have before Fort Missoula, we never had a turfed field with lights where you could basically play all year round. So again, we're trying to strike that balance between property taxes and hiking them, and having users who get direct benefit as a function of their specific needs met. We could entirely fund Parks and Rec all day, and I'll bring you a budget that will increase taxes about 150%, which we can't do for a wide variety of reasons, not the least of which is I don't think we want to do that to people. So again, we're trying to find this middle ground. Ms. Wasika, question?
Yes, I actually have 3 questions. The first one is, I was wondering if we can get the slideshow attached to the agenda. It had a lot of great information on it, and I want to look it over again.
You bet.
Okay, and so regarding, for example, the McCormick softball fields. So for example, if somebody wanted to, like if it's not being used and somebody wanted to teach their kid how to use a bat for like 20 minutes or so, are they expected to pay that hourly fee or?
No, it's a first come, first serve.
Okay. And then I was also wondering, how come there's only a non-swimming rate for seniors? Is there any way for non-swimmers to go into Currents or Splash and pay at a discounted rate if they're not seniors?
We have a non-swimmer rate for adults and seniors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Nugent.
Yeah, given Councilman Carlino's question, you might not know the answer to this, Shirley, but I'd be curious if there's a projection, and if I missed it in your presentation, I apologize, on what the increased fees will bring in increased revenue. That must have been part of the conversation on some level.
I don't have it all added up.
Yeah, so Mr. Nugent, we would have done this based on a cost analysis rather than, we're not thinking about revenue. We're not thinking about revenue sort of beyond cost recovery, and we continue to subsidize. All of this is subsidized to a certain degree already, so we're really just trying to determine what that subsidy is based on cost recovery. But we can get those numbers for you.
Yeah, I can appreciate what you're saying, Mayor, but when we have the public comment saying, "Oh, just fund it," it'd be nice to understand like what is the difference we're expecting with the increase, just so that we understand it better.
We can run that to the ground. Ms. West.
Thanks. So I just had a couple of comments, and one was that Fort Missoula obviously was a bond. We'll just stop there, which has limited things it can fund, and I just wanted to remind folks of that, because we have a bunch of new city council members, and the only thing it could do was really build Fort Missoula and buy, say, like lawnmowers that are going to be used out there, but the actual maintenance and running of Fort Missoula is not something that can be funded by bond funds. So just wanted to provide that context based on some of Mr. Loomis's comments. And then my second comment is around polling permits. If you've never pulled a permit from Parks and Rec, it's not quite as simple as just paying the money. I've pulled permits several times just for the North Side West Side softball game, and there are things you need to provide, like a considerable amount of insurance, for example, for a public event, and I imagine that would go up significantly for an event with 600 people. So it isn't just, paying the fee. There's more, there's more vetting that goes into it than that, which, really, I guess, validates who you are and what you're doing out there or in a public facility. And not that it's an arduous process, but it is a vetted process. So that's all I have for the moment.
Thank you. Ms. Cheryl? Amber, you're muted.
I hit it anyway. Okay. So again, thank you for the presentation. And I believe in user-based fees for the reasons that I think the mayor articulated, but also, our community has an insatiable desire for parks and conservation lands. I've learned that working with Five Valleys. Hold on. I'm really sorry about that. This is working at home. I also don't think that everyone in our community is using those resources. And I think that user-based fees make sense for that reason. And I appreciate Mr. Loomis's comment that we need to fund these things. We need to take care of them, and they're a great community benefit. So, but everyone is not using them the same. So, with regard to Marshall Mountain, that is a really new thing, being with Five Valleys for so many years, and also talking about that as being part of the bond during the open space bond campaign. This was a new thing, and there will be envisioning. We don't own the property yet, and there's going to be some envisioning by the community of what that looks like as we move forward. I guess my question, I also want to say that like I can't remember the numbers because it was a long time ago, but I gave a speech on this one time. This national mountain bike race, this level of event in our community brings a lot of great things to our community, as far as people eating in restaurants and staying in hotels and going to businesses. So I do think there's an economic development component to some of this that I don't want to be completely lost, other than just a public benefit. My question, I think, for Jeff, if he's still here, I can't tell who's there, is with the evaluation process. I really appreciate I was going to ask about the calendaring and how you did that, because I wouldn't want to see it closed for multiple days in a row for different organizations. I understand that mountain bike races can be more than one day. Are you in that evaluation process? Are you looking, are they what are you taking into consideration and who applies for those? Can you give us a little more information on what you look at in that process, other than just the calendar around giving those permits for day closure?
Yes. So there's a few things. So again, remember that we have variable sizes, right? So we have small, medium, large, and then we actually ended up splitting the large into a large and extraordinary size event to account for the fact that, for example, small level or small size events, you could have multiple events happening at the same time, right? Where they're not closing the property, they're not looking for exclusive use of a trail. That could be, let's say, a clinic of some type, right? Summer or winter. There's potential trail use, but it's where somebody is collecting a fee. They're providing a one-time service. They are using the site with larger than 10 individuals. And so therefore, essentially they're reserving their ability to be in that space at that time. So we look at a lot of things, including whether or not somebody is a community organization, whether or not the event is for-profit or nonprofit. Those assessments don't necessarily dictate whether or not somebody would be able to hold their event, but it does inform, again, if we're focusing on making sure that the community has access to the site as much as possible. We have discussed with users potentially moving their events to create a seasonal schedule, right? So shifting events, we don't want it to be closed every Saturday in the month of June, for example. That doesn't make sense. That being said, the end result of that open application period, then working with applicants, is that we have a seasonal calendar that we can publish to the public. So for those few days a year where there is restricted use or it's closed, they are perfectly aware of that. So somebody doesn't drive up to Marshall Mountain, get there, and hit 1,000 people at a large event, right? So the community is very aware of that.
May I have a follow-up, Mayor?
You bet.
So thank you, I appreciate that. But as you're as you're reviewing the application, if my application to close Marshall Mountain for a day says, that Amber wants to sit on the mountain and feel like the queen, you're not going to approve that. So, I mean, is there any more you can give me with regard to that? And I think that was a little bit of Kristen's question is, just making sure that we're not just letting someone that has the money to do that for a day for no community benefit, no economic benefit, no engagement of our community, can do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that, again, it's hard to know exactly what applications we will receive. We haven't received any at this point, and there will be an open period, again, that opens after the public comment period. So I think that, those events that contribute to the community in some way, right? It could be economic, it could be in building, again, we have this, I forget who said it, sort of insatiable outdoor recreation appetite in Missoula, right? So we're building that community. That's why we actually added the youth sports team category, right? That those events that build the community and also strike that balance between allowing access and very occasionally closing access will be considered. I don't want to say that we're not going to consider a particular type of application, because I actually don't think that is equitable, right? If we're going to take in all applications for a single period, determine what we can allow and minimize any impacts to the public who want to use that site, while also allowing for the sort of permitted use of the site, and again, in ways that are not always compatible with when the site is open to the public. Again, that we think that's a minority of applications. It's striking that balance. And remember that, as we said, this is a 2-year trial permit period. So we're trying to figure that as we go. We're actually afforded a really unique opportunity that we can try this before then implementing a full-scale permit system and site management in the future. So we can work out those kinks within the next year or 2 years.
And as part of our public process, we're continuing, right? We don't know the full extent of programming on Marshall under municipal ownership. So that's a big part of the process that Jeff and the team are engaged in right now with the community, is sort of understanding what everyone thinks appropriate uses are. I think, Ms. Cheryl, they have already, however, acknowledged that Amber is queen use is not something we're going to trot out. But there, we may find that that our residents suggest there are certain uses that we should simply rule out of hand because they're not practical, they're not equitable, et cetera, or compatible for that matter.
And I just would add that I think that the those allowed uses or disallowed uses will come out of the public visioning process.
Okay. Further questions, Ms. Cheryl?
No, I really appreciate that clarification, and I also appreciate the fact that we have this 2-year period that we can kind of figure this out, and I think that's important to remember as well.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you, Mayor. And I have a question and a comment. First, I would like to thank Shirley for once again bringing us a presentation with a lot of information. My question is, I should remember this, but old age is catching up with me. It seems like a lot of the fields, the increase is about 10%. Do you know what it was last time? What percentage increase we approved?
We had no increases in 2020. In 2019, 5% sticks in my head for some reason.
That's what I remember too. And so I think it's important to remember that, you know, we've had a huge increase in use of our facilities, and fees didn't go up last year for a number of reasons, but I appreciate that. And I just wanted to mention that during public comment, the issue of equity was brought up, and I appreciate that. But I want to say that, you know, our Parks and Rec department does a tremendous job at following on that guiding principle when they design and provide facilities and programs for the community. But there's also, I think, the issue of fairness that needs to be brought up when it comes to our fee structure, that I don't think it's fair that all taxpayers have to pay for something that only a certain portion of the population is using. So hence the user fee. So I just wanted to point that out as to why I think it goes into the rationale for that fee structure and why I support it. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I guess I appreciate the comments from Ms. Becerra, but want to kind of go back to some of the line of questioning that Ms. Cheryl was bringing up. In the application process, within the application itself, is there a line or information for them to submit that sort of justifies why it is they're asking for the full closure? That then I would support Amber being queen and being able to sit on the mountaintop, but I realize that's probably not a generally felt reason, but it would be great if you kind of put the onus back on them. So then if it is a major sporting event, college event, something like that, it could say, hey, per our whatever governing body rules, and we, to have the facility, we need to have it be closed off for safety of spectators and for our insurance or whatever. And then when you're publicizing that calendar, and so folks can say, okay, wow, Marshall Mountain is closed, Friday and Saturday, the second weekend in July, what the heck's going on? Go on and see, oh, wow, it's this huge event, and sort of like find out a little bit more justification on why that would be closed. And so then hopefully it also offsets and demonstrates a bit of public good that, well, okay, they're expecting 600 participants. If every participant has one support person, that's 12, and kind of multiply it that way. And then I guess, so it's a question and a suggestion, but then also, how are you engaging folks for the ongoing input in this 2-year process? Because so that people can, know where to go and not just wait for the end of the 2 years. Is it kind of an ongoing system that if you can say, hey, I really thought that was a dumb reason why you all closed Marshall Mountain, and here I want to give you my feedback of why. How can folks go and provide that feedback?
So there's a number of things in there. So I really appreciate the, putting the onus back on the permittee applicant, because again, I mean, if somebody says, I'm having a I'm having a wedding, let's say, and I want to completely close the site, right? That's just an example. That if we could work with them to make sure that the site doesn't close, and yet they still can have the type of experience that they want, that would be preferable. And so again, there's kind of this back and forth with a permit applicant, just like we do with any other permit process, especially on conservation lands. I work with them to minimize any impact that they're proposing. Preferably, they would not close the site. If there are event rules, the UCI race is a great example where you cannot have spectators of any type cross the race track, the race course. And again, remember that the way that the trail system is constructed, there are pieces of trail crossing roads, they're utilizing roads. It gets quite complicated, and therefore there's a public safety and a racer or user safety issue with having the site continually open to the public during that type of event. But there's a very valid justification that the event cannot occur as per the governing body's rules without that requirement in place. And so I think we are, that's why, again, we have the vetting process. So if someone says, I just want to close the mountain for myself, they can't arbitrarily do that. We have the ability to say, no, one, we're not going to permit your activity. But two, if you want to have your activity, we are confident that you can do this while also making sure that the site stays open to the public. The second point of the additional information on the event calendar, I think that's a great idea. One, because somebody could say, hey, there's a huge mountain bike race going on. I want to go see this and be a part of it. And it also, again, shares the fact that there's a economic development component to it, that it is community building, right? So it's highlighting the recreation facilities and landscape that we have in Missoula, especially because that level of event draws people from all over the country.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Anderson?
Not for right now. Thanks so much.
Okay. Ms. Jones.
Thanks. I appreciate all the information about Marshall Mountain tonight and the rollout of the public process for the next 18 months and how we're approaching all of it. But I wanted to go back to just fees in general. I think we've got new counselors who are wrapping their mind around fees, and we've had some interesting questions and public comment about basically the formula we try and set up between the different funding sources and strike the right sweet spot with how, for example, I always like to talk about Splash Montana and Currents because we have a very high value of trying to get kids in to learn how to swim, but we also have to finance and fund those entities. So Shirley, my question to you is, I feel like your process is a lot of times you're really trying to predict the next year, predict what's going to happen. And that's where you're trying to hit that sweet spot with fees while making it as accessible as possible, but also funding the costs to a degree from user fees. But the example I like to talk about is with Splash Montana, you can do all sorts of predictions, but if we have a super smoky summer and kids aren't outside very much, although we still have to staff Splash Montana, we're getting less income from those user fees. If we have a cold summer, we're getting less income. If we have a really hot summer with no smoke, which would be great, but we never have anymore, we could do really well with the user fees. But how do you approach that, Shirley? I guess what I want people to understand is our general fund is the backstop for when we have a gap there. So that is where we do have to go to fill that gap. But how do you read those tea leaves, Shirley?
Well, I don't have a magic wand, that's for sure. But, we do the best we can to just project and not project towards ideal conditions, but kind of the middle of the road, because generally we have smoke in August. There's years, there was a couple of years ago when we had 20 days of over 100 degrees and our attendance fell because people didn't want to be out in the heat. So it's really difficult. I appreciate the question, but I think that we just try to take that middle ground and look at an average number of participants that come in over several years to get that average of what we might be able to project.
And again, that's part and parcel of budgeting. And I think I want to once again make this distinction, right? We're budgeting based on projections and a look back in terms of use, but fees are about cost recovery, not about necessarily filling a gap. Having those fees does fill a gap, but it is really about analyzing what's it cost to provide this service, and then doing our best to either recover it or at least partially recover it or reasonably recover it, while continuing to subsidize through general fund tons of operations or through Parks District. And Shirley, I now have a magic wand. Someone gave me one recently, so I will send that over to you to put to work.
Cool.
Ms. Jones, other questions?
No, thanks. I appreciate the discussion on this, though. It's doing the best we can to find that sweet spot that works for people in the community while making the budget work and property taxes work and all of that. So thanks.
Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. I did think of another question while we have the discussion. I just want to say, first of all, I appreciate everybody's patience while I wrap my head around how budgeting works. I'm going to ask a question that I think might kind of show my lack of understanding, but that's why we're asking questions. My question is like, we're doing kind of a big fee adjustment right now. We didn't do one last year. It sounds like we did one in 2019. I'm wondering, like, is there any way to, after this, kind of just adjust fees according to inflation, or is it too complicated? Or too many layers, because there are some pretty significant fee increases this time around that don't kind of correlate with inflation. Is that even a reasonable expectation to say, is it possible for fee increases to parallel inflation? Thank you.
It is possible. We haven't done that as a practice. Really in any of our fees, nor have we done it in utilities, for example, right? There are ways to tie fees and rates to consumer price index or whatever recognized metric or index that's available. What that doesn't do is account for a lot of other variables, including, like last year, it was just sort of a tough year, right? With the first round of the pandemic, and what we didn't want to do was add insult to injury. Not the pandemic has gone away now, but we do have experience with users and recognize that we've got folks who are using these facilities. In fact, in some cases, using them more because they're outside. So that's a perfectly reasonable question. The other piece is that depending on how the larger budget works or how assessments work as a function of tax collection, revenue in, there are some times when we have a little more tax revenue that allows us to strike that balance in a different way. And so, again, we're sort of trying to balance these revenue streams and be as fair as possible about them. But that's a method we could certainly deploy. It's not without it's not without consequence. Other questions? All right. Well, thank you again, Ms. Kinsey. Thank you all. This public hearing will remain open for the next couple of weeks. I'll also note just for the record that with regard to Marshall Mountain, the engagement we've had is pretty remarkable. I think we hit a record, maybe Jeff, with Engage Missoula on the folks who are plugging into that and commenting, and I think that will really shape sort of the community vision for how we use that facility. And it's always been sort of cobbled together, right, under private ownership. So this provides us an opportunity to match this facility to community needs, which is a nice piece of business. So we'll have more on that later. All right, we'll move on to our second public hearing this evening, which is a conditional. I'm sorry.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Shirley. Thanks, Jeff. We'll move on to our conditional use request for veterinary animal services at 1914 South Reserve and 2432 North Avenue West. And our staff report this evening comes from Ms. Postma.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you see the PowerPoint screen?
Not yet.
Oh, all right.
We can see those swank CDPI offices, however.
Oh yeah. Okay, can you see it now?
Almost. There it is.
Perfect. So I'm Deborah Postma from Development Services. And just as we have a lot of recreators in Missoula, we also have lots of pet owners. We received a conditional use request from Adam Jones of Cushing Terrell on behalf of Earl Ellingson for veterinary animal services at 1914 South Reserve Street and 2432 North Avenue West. This conditional use is to expand the existing veterinary use. If approved by City Council, the existing building would be torn down for the new expanded facility to be built. This new building would provide additional space for the growing practice, allow for new veterinary specialists, and accommodate the large community of Missoula pet owners. For each zoning district, the Title 20 zoning ordinance includes permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses. This project's requested use, veterinary services or animal services veterinary, is labeled as a conditional use for its corresponding zoning district. A conditional use is a use that is allowed only if reviewed and approved in accordance with the conditional use procedures of 2085-70, which includes this public hearing and final action by City Council. City Council's final action may be to approve the proposed use, approve with conditions, or to deny. City Council must make their determination based on a list of criteria detailed in Title 20. Not every criteria will apply, and only the applicable criteria must be met. Later in this presentation, I will describe how this proposal addresses each of these criteria. So the subject property, oh, I think I skipped a slide, sorry about that. Okay, the veterinary animal service use is existing at this site. You can see it on the right here. However, per Title 20, requests for conditional use expansions or modifications beyond the original conditional use request, excluding smaller modifications, must go through the conditional use review and approval procedures. The subject property outlined in red is located at the intersection of South Reserve Street and North Avenue West. This property is zoned B2-2 community business and is located in the Design Excellence Overlay and Corridor Typology 4. Design Excellence is an overlay that applies additional design standards to primary commercial areas and towns for projects located in the overlay. Design Excellence review occurred prior to this conditional use review, and the project was approved for compliance with the Design Excellence standards. You can see the zoning designations of adjacent properties on the slide. The surrounding uses include to the north, office space and detached house residential. To the south, across North Avenue West, mixed-use commercial and residential. To the east, single detached residential, and west across Reserve Street, a manufactured housing park. The applicable regional plan is our Missoula City Growth Policy 2035, which recommends a land use designation of community mixed use. Community mixed use designations include a broad range of functions, including retail, education, financial institutions, professional and personal services, offices, residence, and general service activities. In the growth policy, each land use designation has current relatable districts, which help to relate the community's desired direction as it meets new growth challenges. For the community mixed use designation, relatable zoning districts are C1-4, C2-4, and M1R-2. Though this property is not zoned one of the current relatable districts, the districts that would normally correspond to the land use designation, community mixed use, permit veterinary uses by right, meaning a conditional use process would not be required. This slide shows current conditions adjacent to the subject property. To the south, there is a mixed-use building and residential houses. To the west, there are also residential houses. To the east is a manufactured housing park, and to the north is a hospice. So here is the proposed site plan. The site includes a parking area screened with perimeter parking lot landscaping. Along the eastern property boundary, there is a 5-foot landscape buffer and fence in order to mitigate noise and visual impacts on surrounding residential parcels. Utilities are screened with privacy fences. The facility parking lot will be accessed by approaches from North Avenue West and Dirk Drive, where the applicant has obtained a private access easement for the private street. No drive accesses from Reserve Street are proposed. There are pedestrian connections from the front of the building to bike parking and to the public sidewalk on North Avenue West. The site plan has been reviewed for compliance with all zoning codes and design excellence. 22 parking spaces, with 2 of these being ADA, are required, and this number is provided. 2 short-term and 3 long-term bicycle parking spaces are required. 3 short-term and 3 long-term spaces are provided. Here is the proposed ground floor plan, which includes the entrance, emergency room waiting area, and exam and surgery rooms. The table to the right shows the square footage for each floor. The upper floor and basement do not cover the whole building footprint, as you will later see in the elevation slides. As mentioned before, the proposed project has already been approved for compliance with design excellence standards. Staff approved 1 design variation. Design variations through the design excellence review process may be granted administratively by staff. A design variation is appropriate when the design meets the intent of the standard while not meeting the actual standard. The design variation is to the 10-foot floor to ceiling height requirement. The applicant proposes to provide 9-foot tall ceilings in the animal exam rooms, corridors, restrooms, and staff lounge. The proposed building design provides a tall entry and lobby space facing Reserve Street to activate the public realm. Staff determined the 9-foot ceilings to meet the intent of the standard. The variation was requested to provide quality space for the tenant by increasing energy efficiency and improving the acoustics to decrease noise. Decreased interior noise is beneficial to the veterinary use. Here is the upper floor plan, which includes offices, conference rooms, and storage. This is the basement floor plan, which includes storage and specialized therapy rooms. Here are the west and north elevations. The west elevation shows that the building has a street-facing entrance to Reserve Street, and you can see where the building has a partial upper story. Glazing along street-facing facades, such as this one, help to activate the public realm. The north elevation faces Dirk Drive, which is the private street. Here are the east and south elevations. The east elevation is buffered with landscaping and a fence to mitigate noise and visual impacts to the abutting residential properties. The south elevation faces North Avenue West, one of the vehicle entrances. Materials include a mix of 2 types of metal, brick, and fiber cement board. Okay, so now for staff's analysis of how this conditional use proposal meets the 7 criteria of Title 20 that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation and listed on this slide. The first is whether the proposed use complies with all applicable standards of the growth policy, which, as we discussed earlier, it does. The project will comply with design excellence approval, as well as all applicable sections of Title 20 at the time of building permit approval, if City Council imposes the one condition of approval. Second, the veterinary use is in the interest of public convenience and will not have a significant adverse impact on the general welfare of the neighborhood or community. The proposed use is an expansion of the existing use, and the new facility will provide a higher level of service. The building is screened from the abutting residential property and is in an area that is already served by city police and city fire. Third, the veterinary use is compatible with the character of the surrounding area in terms of open space design, screening, and buffering. The veterinary use is compatible with the adjacent commercial businesses in the area, such as the hospice and the mixed-use building. The site planning, building scale, and design are compatible with the surrounding area, and the new facility will enhance street frontages and overall appearance at the intersection. The majority of the building is one story, which is compatible with the single-story hospice and abutting residential buildings. Fourth, since the veterinary use is an expansion of an existing use, the proposed use will not impede the orderly development and improvement of the surrounding properties for uses permitted in the district. Fifth, the proposed use has operating characteristics that are compatible with the surrounding area in terms of hours of operation, outdoor lighting, noise, and traffic generation. The veterinary use replaces an existing facility with the same use and hours of operation. Additional off-street parking and street-facing activity will enhance operating characteristics. The surrounding road infrastructure is adequate to handle a potential increase in traffic generation. Furthermore, noise generated by the use will be required to conform with the regulations for a commercial zone. Next, City Council must determine that the proposed use will not have a significant adverse impact on traffic safety or comfort for all modes of transportation. The design will improve pedestrian and bicycle access with a new accessible route from the public right-of-way to the main building entry. Pedestrian facilities and bike lanes are located along Reserve Street. The facility parking lot will be accessed by approaches from North Avenue West and Dirk Drive, with no drive accesses from Reserve Street. Lastly, the proposed use properly addresses open space, light, and protection of natural features. Street frontage landscaping, perimeter parking lot screening, and buffers are proposed in compliance with Title 20 landscaping standards. There are no significant natural features on or adjacent to the site. The majority of the building is single story, allowing light to access adjacent properties. Staff recommends one condition of approval. The applicant shall comply with all applicable portions of Title 20 and design excellence review approval. Plans submitted at the time of building permit application shall substantially conform with the plan submitted at the time of conditional use review, subject to the review and approval by development services prior to building permit approval. To conclude, staff recommends approval of the animal services veterinary conditional use request located at 1914 South Reserve Street and 2432 North Avenue West in accordance with Missoula City Zoning Ordinance Title 20, Sections 2010, 20D, 208570, and 2105-40A3, and based on the findings of fact in the staff report and subject to the one condition of approval. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Ms. Postma. Anyone here to speak on behalf of the applicant this evening? Deborah, if you wouldn't mind unsharing.
Yeah. Let me find Zoom. Here we go.
Thank you. And Mr. Jacobson.
Yeah, hi, my name's Keith Jacobson with Cushing Terrell. I was the project lead on this project working with Dr. Ellingson in the expansion of his existing facility. I just wanted to thank you guys for taking time, obviously, to hear us here as well, but also I know that Dr. Ellingson is here and he can probably speak a little bit better than I can, but it's been a pleasure working with him and just kind of finding out more about him and the services that his facility provides that we were able to help him kind of bring to life and realize this expansion of his existing facility. And it's just, I can't say enough about how great of a guy and just the service that he provides is, and his attention to detail with what he does, and also the understanding of kind of how architecture can help to enhance kind of his profession as well, has just been great to work with. So with that, I'll let Dr. Ellingson say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. And Dr. Ellingson, by virtue of the fact that I believe I may have paid for a portion of this expansion over the years, because I've never had a canine who had anything happen during normal business hours. Go right ahead, Doc.
Mr. Mayor, I think we've met a couple of times in the past. So.
That we have, sir, yes.
So thank you for considering this proposal, Mr. Mayor and members of the committee. And as it's been mentioned already, we've been in operation at this site already, and we'd like to expand next door. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have this evening.
Thank you, sir. With that, I will open the public hearing. And we do not at the moment have any hands raised. So are there questions from council members? Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Willing to go vet bill for vet bill with you, as I think we should all get a plaque. If I understood the presentation correctly, it does sound as though the current structure will be completely dismantled and a whole new. It's not an add-on; it's a complete demolish and redo. Correct? And I guess. Any opportunities for deconstruction versus demolition, and what the existing business if will temporarily relocate.
And Mr. Jacobson or Dr. Ellingson, you can answer those if you would. Mr. Jacobson.
Sure. Yeah, great question, and thank you for asking. We have considered the deconstruction as a possibility, so we can. We are thinking about getting in touch with Wasteless Works and Quality Construction, who's working on this project, to see if there is an opportunity for anything to salvage. I know Dr. Ellingson will be bringing a lot of his existing equipment over from the existing building to the new facility. And to answer your second question, the way that we've phased this project is that the existing building will stay open. So we'll be constructing the additional house or the adjacent house Dr. Ellingson already purchased, and it has been demolished. So we will begin building the new facility directly adjacent to the existing facility, and that existing facility will continue to operate throughout the construction process and provide the same services with the same hours during construction in the same location.
Thank you, sir. Further questions? Mr. Nugent.
Yeah, forgive me, I'm just kind of learning how to read these and follow these. But the one condition of approval is that it complies with the applicable portions of Title 20 and Design Excellence Review. Would that not be automatic is design excellence review not an automatic criteria? And forgive my naivety. I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, no problem. This is Cassie Tripard, planning supervisor. That is a standard condition we recommend for all conditional uses. It is a given that it must comply with Title 20 and design excellence. The important part of that condition is that when they get to building permit, whatever is approved today will need to be what they submit. So they're not allowed to make major changes between this hearing and what actually goes in on the ground, if you guys do choose to impose that.
Sounds like a perfect item for code reform. Got belt and suspenders going on there. I like it. Additional questions, Mr. Nugent?
Nope, that was it. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. West.
Sorry, remuted myself. So I had a question around the 22. I think it said that there were 22 parking spaces required, which at first I realized that that's, I think, based on the square footage of the building, which at first seemed like a lot to me. And then I realized how big the facility was. And I was wondering, like, is that adequate parking for staff and visitors without having an impact on neighbors, for example? Or is it too much? Like, how does it compare to actual, like, the actual operation of the business?
Planners want to take a run at that?
Yeah, I can attempt. Again, Cassie Tripard, planning supervisor. The veterinary use in Title 20 does require one space per 480 square feet. I'm sure these numbers are fairly old and we do want to look at them with code reform. Other things that require that or are similar or kind of office uses have similar requirements. Is it enough or not enough? That's a little bit hard to answer. As far as I wasn't around when the zoning was produced. So when it was, I'm guessing there was a study done to ensure that this would serve the property or use adequately.
Thanks, Mr. Tripard. Dr. Ellingson, can you tell us about how many employees you have at any given time and if they're parking?
Yes, so typically we're running 6 or 7 employees at a time, and currently we have 5 parking spaces right now, and so we do use some street parking as well, and we would probably continue to do so.
Great. Thank you. Ms. West, did that get you where you needed to be?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure we'll revisit all of this when we move to a UDO, hopefully.
Great. Mr. Hess.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to talk for a moment about process for the benefit of the new members. So this will be back to the Land Use and Planning Committee on Wednesday. So if you have additional questions, you can ask them either before Wednesday or at the meeting on Wednesday. And then this is how we've done land use items for the last several months, and we may end up revising this a little bit as part of the rules discussion, but essentially we have the public hearing, and then we have a post-public hearing informational item where you can engage in additional questions or discussion, and then the items back for final consideration next week.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Deborah and Cassie. Thanks, Dr. Ellingson, Mr. Jacobson. This public hearing will remain open for the next couple of weeks and will be taken up by council at its next regular meeting. We have no additional public hearings this evening, nor do we have any items for final consideration. Communications from the mayor is our next agenda item, and I just want to briefly acknowledge my lovely friends and second family, the Belushis. Beverly Belushi, who was among my surrogate moms, passed away today. She'll be missed by many people. A lovely human being, part of a generation of humans who engaged in all sorts of service and were always looking for opportunities to help friends and neighbors. And I'm going to miss you, Bev. You were a good egg. We'll move on to comments from council members. We're starting with Mr. Hess up in the left-hand corner.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll pass tonight.
Mr. Nugent.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to quickly call attention. There's an effort at the state level to enact a constitutional initiative to change the way property taxes are levied, or I guess change the way properties are assessed and value. And I would just caution people to pay attention to the details before sharing how great of an idea this might be, because nothing is free. And Montana's tax system at the state level is so broken that restricting it further without better solutions is going to harm local government, city police, parks, you name it, to levels that I don't think we understand. So I just wanted to bring attention to that because I've seen it start getting shared in some news coverage. And I think it's important that people understand it before they jump out into it.
Mr. Contos.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Ms. Cheryl.
Thanks, and thank you, Mike, for those comments. I think that's a really important message. I just want to remind people, we all, I'm beating a dead horse here. We all know we're in a pandemic, and that it's not over. But our case numbers, we measure it by cases per 100,000. On December 20th, that was 12. On January 4th, that was 55. And as of the 10th, it's 118 cases per 100,000 people. So new cases. So, it is, we haven't seen what this is going to do to hospitals yet. But if you do the math, even if you have 1,000 cases with a 5% hospitalization rate, that's 50 people in the hospital in comparison to, when we had Delta, these aren't real numbers of percent of hospitalizations, but 100 cases with a 10% hospitalization is 10 people. So, even though it is putting less people in the hospital, if our numbers get high enough, it's going to be a strain on our hospital system and the capacity of the hospital. The other problem that we are seeing, so we don't know what the strain is going to be quite yet because there's a lag behind case spikes of hospitalizations. But what we are seeing is that it is taking out so many staff members in the hospital that could potentially become a problem. So we all know what to do. We know what you can do to avoid it. I'm just saying we're there again. It's a little different than it was, especially for those of us that are vaccinated, but take it seriously. And we've just got to all continue to try to ride this thing out together. Thanks.
Mr. Carlino.
I'll pass tonight.
Ms. Becerra.
I'll pass tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Jones.
Thanks. And first of all, my condolences, Mr. Mayor. So sorry about the passing. I did want to briefly talk about a subject. On January 7th in the Missoulian, there was a very large op-ed signed by 35 wildlife biologists. And I would encourage everyone to look up that op-ed and read it. The theme of it is the fact that 50 years ago, grizzly bears were on the verge of extinction. And over the last 50 years, through good wildlife management and a lot of expertise, most of it centered in Montana, grizzly bears came back to the point where they actually could be delisted and not be under the Endangered Species Act. That was a handful of years ago. However, this last legislature passed numerous laws regarding how grizzlies could be hunted. And that is the subject of this op-ed, and the fact that it was signed by 35 experts in the field, 2 of whom I know, Chris Servine, who is been instrumental and is a nationally renowned expert on grizzlies. And the second one is Doug Chadwick, who's also a wildlife biologist who contributes frequently to the National Geographic. So that just gives you an idea of the caliber of people signing this op-ed and saying, this is not good, and we need to take a hard look at these new laws that are coming through, because grizzlies will be back on the verge of extinction in a matter of years if things don't change from the direction they're going. So I just want to put that out there because I think that's incredibly important. And the experts are speaking and speaking up loudly. So I hope people are listening, pay attention, contact your legislators if you have opinions on this. Thanks.
And Ms. Savage.
I'll just briefly echo what Ms. Cheryl said. As someone who's been home with a sick child for what feels like forever at this point, we're seeing a lot of cases rise. My daughter's school closed last Thursday and Friday, not because of so many cases of COVID among the children, but so many cases of COVID among the staff members. They just simply didn't have enough teachers. So I agree, numbers are going up. It's exhausting. I think we're all exhausted. I am personally exhausted by the pandemic. So yeah, everyone be safe out there.
Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. So tomorrow, January 11th, is National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. Human trafficking is a very real thing that does happen here in Missoula, Montana. And some of the ways that you can bring awareness to it is Wear Blue tomorrow. Also, you can go to MissoulaHumanTrafficking.com. It has a lot of great resources and a lot of great educational and frequently asked questions stuff on there. So I would encourage you to go to that website, learn something about it, pass it on to a friend. There is a Montana Human Trafficking Hotline that is answered 24/7 by advocates who can point to immediate help and continued resources. You can call or text this phone number. It is 1-833-406-STOP. So that's 1-833-406-7867. So if you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking, I would encourage you to reach out to that phone number, or you can always call 911. So Wear Blue in awareness of this horrible subject. Thanks.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo the condolences Ms. Jones shared with you and your surrogate family. It's been a rough one for you, and you're in our thoughts. Also wanted to quickly give a shout out to the Missoula Fire Department for their quick responses yesterday for some structure fires, and just take this opportunity to remind folks, now that we've got snow on the ground and in some places lots of snow, that the best thing you can do to help out the Missoula Fire Department, yourself and your neighbors, is to clear a berm around your your neighborhood fire hydrant. So in case of emergency, they're not having to do that themselves, same way that we try to keep our storm rate drains clear. God forbid that fire truck is pulling up in front of your house, and if it is, then you want them to get that to work as quickly as possible. So help out yourself and your neighbors by making clearing out your local your neighborhood fire hydrant. Absolutely want to echo what Ms. Cheryl and Ms. Savage said around the numbers we're seeing in with the pandemic. Great Falls right now, school district, the entire school district is going remote for the next couple weeks because they are so understaffed. So it's not just simply about whether or not you are sick and what mild case it is. It affects children and learning and ability to take care of all of the other health issues that happen on a daily basis here, making sure that we have enough caregivers in the hospitals and just every aspect of life. So, I also feel like I'm screaming into the void on this. There are also members of our community that, despite being vaccinated and boosted because of underlying health conditions, being immunocompromised, do not have the same level of protection that some of the rest of us do. And so whether or not you're haphazardly like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter if I get it, it'll be mild. You have no idea who it is that you're standing next to in line at the grocery store. And it could be someone like my mother who has no immunity whatsoever, despite trying to get all the vaccinations. So, we're all exhausted and want nothing more than this to be over with. But wearing a mask is not, I think, too much to ask to protect our community, keep our kids in school, keep our caregivers at the hospital, and keep our loved ones safe. So, just please, it's a piece of cloth and it can save someone's life. So want to put that out there. Also, thanks, Mr. Nugent, for bringing up the cap property tax discussion that is starting to pop up. I have spent a lot of time talking about how I think our overall state tax structure is broken, but this is absolutely in no way, shape, or form the fix to that. This is simply making things worse. It is cutting off vital income to municipalities, to schools, and there is absolutely no plan to basically backfill that income. It is a Kansas-style method of just cutting to the bone, past the bone, to the quick, and just expecting us to sort of figure it out. So conversations about fee structures and just properly funding parks, that will just be a thing of a past, because we will literally just be trying to fill potholes and making sure that there are firefighters and police officers answering those 911 calls. So this is a disaster for our municipalities, especially for our school districts. If anyone's paid attention to what Prop 13 did to the overall school districts in California and the decades it took for them to get on the right track, we in Montana are blessed with amazing public schools that are properly funded, that all give world-class education, and we need to continue to support that, as well as support our municipal government. So thanks so much for bringing that up. I'm sure we'll be talking more about that, but if you get approached by someone asking you to sign the petition, know that this is not at all the panacea that it sounds, and it will cause more harm than good. So thanks so much for that, and everyone continue to be safe out there with the winter conditions. Thanks.
Ms. Jordan.
I'll pass tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Ms. West.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, thank the Missoula Fire Department for a pretty amazing response to a fire we had over here on the north side on Saturday. It was a pretty, devastating loss for our neighborhood, and I'll be looking forward to see how the businesses that are located there recover. And then I also just want to let folks know that if you're like me and you're constantly stockpiling things that you don't want to throw away and think have a use in the future, Parks and Rec is collecting things like paper towel rolls and jars and lids and rubber bands for their Lowell after school program. So if you have any of those things sitting around, you can call the school or just drop them off by the front office, and kids will be using them to make crafts. So thank you.
Thank you all. We have no committee reports this evening, nor do we have any items of new business. Are there any additional items to be referred tonight? Seeing none of those, any miscellaneous communications, petitions, reports, or announcements? Seeing none, as always, I thank you for your service, and we will be adjourned.